So here's our quoted illustration, and you want all of your illustrations and, of course, all of your paragraphs in the rhetorical appeals section of your paper to be filled with quotes and other direct references to the text. The only way to truly support any kind of analysis is by looking very closely at the object that you're analyzing. So you're definitely going to need a lot of direct support from the text. This should be in the form of direct quotes, like the one you see here, and also paraphrase. Um, that extra material in Module 2 that I mentioned earlier, there is some material about how to properly and safely paraphrase so as to avoid um, plagiarism. So paraphrase should be one of the tools in your toolbox when it comes to quoting and citing. So in any case, uh, remember that our point sentence for this particular paragraph on logos is that Rhodes is using logos in order to kind of poke holes in well-established arguments that link violent media to violent action. And here's a specific example of that we're using as a quoted illustration. In disputing the 22-year study of psychologists Aaron and Huseman, Rhodes points out that, quote, the correlation between a preference for violent TV and aggression only turned up in one of three measures of aggression and, quote, didn't show up in students' reports about themselves in psychological testing. So that's a pretty elaborate elaborately formatted quote out of necessity. And again, hopefully that your quotation skills are up to snuff. There is a PowerPoint in Unit 2, along with obviously a lot of other material that does give you quite a lot of good kind of guidance on using quotation and citation. But here you can see we've got brackets, we've got a split quote, and it's properly cited, and so on. And these are all the ways that you should be comfortable using quotation in this way. But in any case, as it relates to the rhetorical appeals section, this illustration is exactly what an illustration should be. There is no commentary yet. There's no discussion from you about this quote. It's just an example. And the pie format depends on you providing an assessment or an argument in the point part of the pie format, following that up with just data, just information in the form of illustration. So just an example by itself. You're taking a chunk of the text and you're putting it with proper quotation formatting into your paper as an example. It is only when you get to the explanation portion over here that you talk about what that illustration means, and it's important to keep those two things separate. So, we find an example of logos in Rhodes's article, and that's our illustration. Then we explain why it's logos and how it functions in the explanation portion. So here Rhodes uses logos by pointing out that the study draws its conclusions from only one of three measures of aggression, and not even the most important of the three. That is the results of psychological testing. So, in proper pie format, that explanation allows us to relate our illustration or show how our illustration relates back to the point, making all three a set of three. So, give your interpretation of how logos is used or whatever appeal it is that you're talking about. Provide the illustration of an example of that, and then explain that illustration. And do that several more times to generate a full paragraph. So as you can see, we've got another illustration and another explanation, both connecting back to the point, a third illustration explanation connecting back to the point, and as many as you need to fully establish and make that point. But every quote should have its own explanation.